Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. It's Navy Week this week. It marks a key turning point in the India-Pakistan War of 1971, where the Indian Navy inflicted one of the most comprehensive naval defeats of the 20th century on the Pakistan Navy. Naval missile boats fired close to a dozen anti-ship missiles, sinking several Pakistani warships and setting Karachi port ablaze. Now, those attacks were enabled only because India had Russian missile boats firing a revolutionary missile of that time, the P-15 Termit. Now, 53 years later, India has tested another naval missile, a hypersonic missile that can fly over 8 times the speed of sound. This naval hypersonic ballistic missile was first tested on the 17th of November, just 2 weeks ago. This naval missile brings a capability the Navy Chief Admiral D.K. Tripathi told me today he would like to have tomorrow. But first, listen into what he said about this missile.
We are working very closely with DRDO because it is a huge capability enhancement. So if you ask me, I want it tomorrow. It is not going to happen tomorrow. But it will happen pretty fast because it has been a success, and it is a matter of time when this capability is inducted, and when it is done, be just assured that you will get a call from me. As of now, yes, it is anti-ship missile, so it is a naval missile. You are right, there is a discussion which is happening about the rocket force. It is still in a discussion stage. How this will take shape, what all will come into it, we are still in discussion.
But the question, as always, is by when can we expect induction of this strategic deterrent missile and the offensive potential that it brings for the Indian Navy? Joining me to discuss this are Vice Admiral K.N. Sushil and Commodore C. Uday Bhaskar. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Admiral Sushil, I want to start by asking you this. We are talking 53 years after the 1971 war, when the Indian Navy literally rewrote the annals of naval warfare with that successful 1-2 punch against Karachi. We had the P-15 missile then. In terms of milestones and what the Navy has tested with the DRDO, of course, this hypersonic missile, the test that was carried out on the 17th of November. Tell us the significance of this missile, what it means for the Indian Navy in 2024.
Well, we always been talking, about revolution in military affairs as technologies give you more and more capabilities. And to really visualize a capability like this, that means to have an hypersonic missile now is the thing to have. I mean, you can say that we have started running the race of technology quite well now. Maybe it's a little delayed because hypersonic missiles have been deployed earlier. But we have reached, or we are running the race to, get there, which is a very good thing. Hypersonic missiles have their own worth basically because of the extremely high speeds, the inability of the defense systems to cope with the incoming missile and so on and so forth. We saw what's happening in Ukraine with Russia's new MIRV type of hypersonic missile which they have just fired.
Right, absolutely. Admiral, thanks for putting that into perspective.
Can
I'm going to go to Commodore Uday Bhaskar. Commodore Bhaskar, you're a very keen watcher of military affairs, the RMA that Admiral Sushil mentioned. And in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we've seen not one but 2 types of hypersonic missiles being deployed by the Russian Federation. The air-launched version, which they've been using for several months now, the Kinjal, and of course, more recently, the Oreshnik, which Admiral Sushil mentioned that they deployed with MIRVs. Explain to us how the Indian Navy and the DRDO seem to have caught up on this race of technology, and what should our priorities be in the months ahead?
Sandeep, to place India's missile development in context, you'll recall that we started this in 1983.
Yes.
It was the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you had reminded the viewers about the December 1971 operation,
Yes.
where the Indian Navy had used the missile boats and the P-15, the Papa 15 missile in a
Yes.
very innovative way. And that changed what I would call as the grammar of naval warfare at that time. This
Right.
was the early 60s. And if you look at how India, the institutional kind of policy decisions, at the highest levels, the Prime Minister's office onwards, they decided to prioritize missile development.
Right.
This was the mid-80s. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira
Yes.
Gandhi. And with very able support from the DRDO, and some of the names that come immediately to mind are people like Dr. Arunachalam, who was
Yes.
the scientific advisor at that time, and later Dr. Abdul Kalam, who also became the President of India. The missile development program received a very, very high sense of purpose.
Right.
And we saw the kind of milestones that were achieved. Within this, if I were to reconstruct, I would say that in the last 10 years, there
Yes.
has been a lot of focus in R&D in the major powers,
Yes.
particularly Russia, China, and the United States, about getting a hypersonic cruise missile.
Yes.
And as Admiral Sushil had just mentioned, anything that crosses Mach 5, that is 5 times the speed of sound, between Mach 5 to roughly Mach 10, we are talking about hypersonic missile capability.
Yes.
They come in two variants. One is the cruise, the other is the glide.
Right.
And from whatever is available in the public domain, you can see that the DRDO has focused on acquiring a certain level of competence with the hypersonic cruise missile. And clearly, from all the media reports that we have seen, November 17 has been successful test firing.
Yes.
But even now, I caution and say that perhaps we are still at the technology demonstrator level.
Right.
And as you pointed out in your opening remarks, we have to move into serial production.
Right.
And this is very expensive business. So I think today India can claim satisfaction and some degree of pride that we have now joined the ranks of Russia, China, the United States, and now India.
Right.
And major powers like Germany, Japan, etc., are also embarked on their own hypersonic cruise missile programs. But we are already there. And as Sushil said, we are in the race. We've picked up the baton.
Yes.
We have to see how it will be passed amongst the other players to ensure that we have adequate number
Right.
of these missiles, because they are very expensive. Let me sort of
Right.
underscore that point again, because it's going to be a budgetary exercise. Will the Indian Navy have adequate resources to be able to acquire them in a credible manner? That is the policy decision.
That's a
I
policy decision indeed, Commodore Uday Bhaskar. The fact that there's also the challenge of moving this missile from the technology demonstrator that it is to serial production when it actually is inducted into the Navy. And that's possibly the reason why the Navy chief also mentioned this is a technology he'd like to have tomorrow. But, given this long technology development phase, there is a need for us to look at a roadmap. Admiral Sushil, could you come in on this, on how we could possibly shorten this time from technology demonstrator to serial production? Because that seems to be the challenge really in the Indian system. We have these one-off missile tests, but by the time they actually reach the services, the users, several years have passed. Is there some way that we can actually capture this moment that Commodore Uday Bhaskar mentioned, that this missile that, to quote him, changed the grammar of naval warfare? This is a technology that's changed the grammar of naval warfare. We've seen it in wars around us. How can we shorten this process, Admiral Sushil?
That's a very good question, but very tough to answer, as you well know. The point here is that, like Uday Bhaskar mentioned, it's changed the grammar. As long as the government and the people in it have understood that this is the game changer, this is the technology which we must have if national security is to be ensured,
Yes.
then there would be a push from that side. Many of the delays which take place are, decision delays, bureaucratic delays, which have stymied a whole lot of projects. I hope that such delays which can be avoided, which should be avoided, are avoided, and the scientists and those people who are technologically competent work with a free hand to get to where we have to get. Once that is assured, I think we can cut down the timelines very, very drastically. But having said that, I think 2 to 3 years is very, very optimistic for a missile development like this. Because
Right.
if you take the BrahMos missile and we wanted a submarine
Yes.
version of that, it has taken us many, many years. Similarly, to have a cruise missile fired from the submarine despite having the club missile, etc., has
Yes.
taken its own time, and we've been depending upon technologies from elsewhere. But I hope that this leap, gives us the acceleration that technological capabilities would have put into the DRDO, and then maybe, quickly reach this capability as we could.
Right. So, a quick follow-on question to you, Admiral Sushil, based on what you just said. Where do the delays actually? I mean, obviously, it's apples and oranges, most of these cases. But where do these delays usually result? Is it a fact that is it because the policymakers don't realize the importance of a certain platform or a missile or a capability, which is why they don't allocate enough resources or attention spans to those systems which need to be prioritized?
It's a combination of many of these things. Once a case is put up, and it's a bureaucratic process. Once a case is put up and an amount is sanctioned, and if the stated aim is not realized within that sanction, you have to go for a fresh sanction to the government and get the financial powers approved. Now, this process is one, it's time consuming. Secondly, it depends on how the bureaucrats and the chain which gets into the process of allocating these resources look at these things. They take a pessimistic view or are skeptical about what will happen. They may not sanction the project, and it will take DRDO another 4-5 years to go around with the begging ball to restart the whole process again till somebody comes along and says, okay, go ahead. Right. I mean, these are the sort of things which have happened, and we know many cases where we have gone halfway through the project and come back. Yes. And going back from the past, DRDO itself has, though not run the last mile, are very capable of very happy to close cases saying that, it was a technology demonstrator and we don't want to go any further.
Right.
So these things have happened.
Yes, these things have happened indeed, but in this case, it seems to be, I think there is a perfect alignment at least of the users, that is the services, and this is a naval missile program. As the Chief mentioned today, there seems to be an alignment of the DRDO and the Navy in this project. But Commodore Uday Bhaskar, this capability of this missile, it's a long-range anti-ship ballistic missile of the kind that few nations have possessed. In fact, we drew a circle around the Andaman Islands from where possibly this missile could be launched from, and we discovered that it covered most of the South China Sea. So, in a sense, you today have at least the building blocks of the kind of technology that could make sea denial missions for the Indian Navy a reality, without having to rely on, say, platforms or, surface ships or SSNs, which are delayed by several decades. Do you think that this missile and the capability that it brings could actually help substitute several shortfalls that we may have in our force planning?
Sandeep, when I use the phrase saying that it alters the grammar of warfare,
yes,
this is really at the heart of it, meaning that a hypersonic missile with the kind of velocity with which it moves between 5 to 10 Mach, and the fact that it cannot be detected,
right, makes
it a very lethal weapon. In terms of its ordnance, it's almost comparable to a nuclear weapon.
Right.
We saw that in the case of Russia's use of the LRAShM.
Yes.
That without the radiation, most experts are now agreed that a hypersonic missile can create that kind of a destructive impact in terms of the index that we associate with ordnance. Yes. But I want to introduce a slight caution here.
Right.
Of now, the hypersonic missile is being, of course, everyone is racing because of technology, but it has an inherent instability about it, because I think we must remember that missiles are not necessarily like the artillery guns of old or the 6-inch guns on battleships that you kept pounding them.
Right.
The idea of a missile, for instance, the ballistic missile, the SSBN, is to engender and increase stability. So one of the inherent problems conceptually with the hypersonic cruise missile, and the Cold War actually had taught us some lessons, that having these missiles which cannot be detected do not necessarily enhance stability.
Right.
So therefore, for us, when we talk about having this, I think the first point is it's not just a naval missile.
Yes.
I'd like to make the case that this is actually an Indian military capability
Right.
in terms of India's trans-border military index.
Yes.
Last time on we spoke about the TBM.
Yes.
That this, in today's technology, every country is trying to acquire greater levels of trans-border military capability. It can be
Yes.
delivery of ordnance like a missile, or it
Right.
can be surveillance like
Right.
a satellite. So I think this particular test of November 17
Yes.
demonstrates India's overall trans-border military capability. You can have it on a ship. It
Yes.
can be on a land. It can perhaps even be air launched.
Yes.
There are many variants as we go along. But at the end of the day, these are not just for firing on targets.
Yes.
These are to enhance your overall profile
Right.
and ensure that we don't slip into a war. So I see that as a challenge,
Right.
not just for India, including China, including Russia. Are we just going to see this as an equivalent of a computer game?
Right.
Or are we going to look at larger issues of deterrent stability?
Yes.
Because if this ordnance is almost proximate or equivalent to a nuclear detonation without the atomic radiation,
Yes.
what is it to stability? I think these are questions that the strategic community and security planners would grapple with.
Absolutely, and the point that you made, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, about the trans-border military capability that it brings to India is significant. And of course, it's a naval missile and a naval missile program, but it is actually a national military capability that we've developed here. Just as the P-15 missile that was tested in 71 in combat was actually a national missile program, but unfortunately it was never converted into a national missile program, which ought to have been a universal cruise missile used by all the services, but I think we woke up late on that. But Admiral Sushil, tell us how this missile could help the Navy stabilize things in the Indian Ocean region. When you're looking at, there's a lot of concern over the growth, the explosive growth of the PLA Navy in terms of surface combatants. Do you see this missile as restoring the balance in a sense that the Navy today would be more confident, and not just the Navy, any service that uses this missile is more confident in deterring any kind of Chinese adventurism using a larger Navy? Admiral Sushil.
Just before I go into that, a few years back, they had come out with something called MOAB, which was called Mother of All Bombs, or Massive Ordnance Airburst, which had the destructive capability without the nuclear effects. It was a conventional weapon which had an equivalent of nuclear weapon. So that is one part. The hypersonic part of this is the kinetic energy.
Yes.
So that is not the destructive capability, it is the ordnance which it carries that gives the destructive capability. Now, as far as the Navy is concerned, this capability is fascinating because 1,500 kilometers range gives you a reach even from a conventional submarine or ships, which is commanding in terms of being able to deliver ordnance in such massive areas. Therefore, this capability is like or something similar to having a theater nuclear deterrent capability.
Right.
So therefore, in the busy areas of the international seas, these may not be so effective unless we have the MDA capability which can precisely target what we want. Otherwise, leaving the main sea lanes of communication, etc., you really have the capability of controlling and denying the sea areas with this sort of a capability.
Right.
Plus, the most important thing is that having such a capability demonstrated would show that this could be used and will be used more than we would think of using a nuclear weapon because of its non-nuclear character.
Right.
Gives you and therefore that demonstrated capability with the ease of policy making makes it a very, very potent weapon.
Right, it makes it a very potent weapon, but offensive and defensive weapon. But Admiral Sushil, what would be the technical challenges involved in this? Targeting a missile of this range and speed. What were the other allied constructs that you would have to put into place to ensure that this missile goes where it does? Would it be the seeker technology, for instance, to the ability to pick up ships?
The seeker is in the last mile part of the whole firing process. But the pre-process of target selection,
Right.
target motion parameters, etc., target motion parameter, the target selection and identification is the most
Yes.
vital part, which will rely on satellites possibly, plus with the coming of drones, it would be much more easier to focus on given areas more precisely than what you would have done earlier. And these sort of enhanced capabilities would add on to our already ongoing programs of MDA and so on and so forth, which also gives the platform, that means the firing platform, and real-time analysis of what's going to happen before he actually launches a weapon, and therefore more clarity in making this weapon launch decisions.
Right, more clarity on these weapon launch decisions, and of course there is a very large paraphernalia involved in making sure a missile like this is far more effective, and this is much more complicated than what it was possibly in 1971, days of simpler P-15 missiles that had a range, correct me if I'm wrong, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, a range of 40 miles, 40 nautical miles is what the P-15 went to.
Yeah, roughly, that was around the...
And today you're looking at something that, a missile that could fly between Bombay and Delhi. I mean, it's the distance between these two big metros of India, and that is the kind of capability that it brings to. But would it be a stabilizing influence, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, the fact that you have capabilities like this and which you can build on in the next couple of years? Will it stabilize the whole?
Yeah, I think I'd frame it in this manner, Sandeep, that once India acquires capability in an operational sense,
yes,
we move from technology demonstrator and it's proven operationally for
right,
whatever deployment that we decide, it would definitely enhance
yes,
the deterrent capability, meaning
right,
hypothetically spoke about a Chinese task
right,
force
right,
entering the Indian Ocean with impunity. That may not be possible if India
right,
were to have an adequate hypersonic missile capability. But that having been said, when we talk about enhancing stability
yes,
in a strategic sense, I think all the countries that have this capability should actually sit down and agree on the equivalent of the rules of the game.
yes,
We speak about the grammar of warfare. It is necessary, as the Cold War has taught us after the Cuban Missile Crisis,
yes,
that there is a framework, there are certain red lines.
right,
And that the whole purpose of acquiring strategic capability is to prevent any nation from hypothetically going through a Hiroshima-Nagasaki experience,
right,
but at the same time ensuring that you do not get into a situation where deterrence fails. And for that, I think India should consider getting into some kind of talks on
yes,
the use of the hypersonic cruise missile. And one last point, if I may add, Sandeep,
yes, certainly,
immediately after November 17th, I think from our past experience, I have long argued DRDO should not be saddled with production.
yes,
They are R&D, they are defense research and development.
right,
Having given the country a technology demonstrator, I think this is where the PMO and the highest levels of decision making in the CCS have to look at alternate models where production is assigned to another entity.
yes,
It not necessarily be public sector. Our experience with the public sector has been mixed. But today there is so much talk about public-private partnerships. I think if you can bring the cost of the missile down, and
yes,
this is a global effort, perhaps then we are talking about something that is doable. And to go back to your original question, what is the way ahead? What is the blueprint? I think that would be the kind of
a public-private partnership, indeed. Thank you very much, Commodore Uday Bhaskar. In fact, thank you for joining us this evening, Admiral Sushil as well. You heard it from two of the finest naval experts that we have on the game-changing potential of this new naval hypersonic missile that's changed the grammar of warfare, indeed, and what we need to do in the years ahead to ensure that this missile moves from the technology demonstrator phase to actual production and with the services. You heard it from the two experts who tell us that speed is of the essence. And of course, we're talking of hypersonic missiles, so it's all about speed. We need faster induction of these capabilities to stabilize the security scenario in South Asia.